Hi scientists, Mrs. Booth here again. Are you ready to get on with some science learning today? Hope so. Today we are going to be learning how to draw our own classification key so that we can group and learn about different species of animals. First though, let's get our brains warmed up as usual. I want you to look at these 4 animals and I want you to think very carefully about which one is the odd one out. You might want to look carefully at how they are grouped, so perhaps their classifications. Maybe you think about their vertebrates or invertebrates. Maybe you want to think about their diet or perhaps their habitat. Which one of these do you think is the odd one out? So we've got the green anaconda snake, the toucan, the black tarantula, and our magnificent jaguar. Did you circle the black tarantula? I did. That was my first attempt at an odd one out because it is not a vertebrate. It does not have a backbone. It is an invertebrate. That's how it is classed. All the others all have backbones and so are vertebrates. So this would make the spider the odd one out. But when I was sat there thinking about each of these animals, I did notice that I could classify these animals in a different way and I could group them differently. So I started to think about their diet, the things they eat to give them energy. And I actually decided that these is not the odd one out and that the toucan is the odd one out because it is an omnivore. It eats both plants and other animals. All the other animals are all carnivores. See, whatever way we look at things, we can group things in different ways and it's a really useful skill. Did you find a different way of grouping these and finding an odd one out? You'll have to let us know. So today you are definitely going to need a ruler because we are going to be drawing our own classification keys. You will need a pencil, probably to draw your straight lines, or a pen, and you'll need your workbook or paper to work in. Pause it now if you need to go and grab anything. So, our key vocabulary is the same as our last lesson. We are using the same vocabulary to help us draw our classification key. We are still classifying animals. We are finding what groups they belong to, but we are being much more specific about what we are looking at using our careful observation as scientists. We'll be comparing animals, looking at differences and at similarities. We'll be using our key. And as all good biologists, we will be using our observational skills. So to help us to start with, I thought it'd be useful to recap some of our learning from the infants and to remind us what exactly makes our 6 classes of animals and what's the differences between them. So first we have the mammal. The mammal, like a jaguar, is a warm-blooded animal and it has hair, it's got live offspring and it feeds their babies. What does it feed their babies? What do mammals like me and you, like cows and dolphins and lions, all these different mammals, what do they feed their babies? Did you say milk? Absolutely, they feed their babies milk, and that is what makes a mammal a mammal. Next we've got fish. Fish live in, I hope you said water. They're cold-blooded and they use or have what to breathe? What do fish use to breathe? We have our lungs and when we breathe in, we fill our lungs, but how do fish breathe? What do they use? Fabulous, gills. They use gills to breathe. So mammals, their main difference is that they feed their babies milk. Fish live in water and they have gills to breathe. Amphibians. Amphibians are like our frogs and newts and toads, and they need water to survive. They'll be found in ponds and rivers and anywhere that water will be. They have unshelled eggs. When we're talking about that, we're thinking about frog spawn that you find in the pond. They don't have a shell around, and their eggs move into a different stage, like our tadpoles, before they become frogs. And then they are also cold-blooded. Reptiles. Can you think of some reptiles? Snakes and lizards, absolutely. They are also cold-blooded. They're covered in what? Yes, they're covered in scales. And most reptiles lay hard-shelled eggs. Birds. Now, what makes birds special? How do you know that something is a bird? And it's not that it can fly, because not all birds fly. What do birds have that makes them different to other animals in the animal kingdom? Absolutely, feathers. Birds have feathers, and they also have hard-shelled eggs. When we're saying offspring, offspring means babies. It's a scientific language for babies. Now, the final group that I have put on the end is invertebrates. Now, in the infants, you might have called them insects, but we know now that invertebrates, there are lots of different types of invertebrates. You can have arachnids, like the spider that's on your screen, or you could have insects, which have got 6 legs. There are all sorts of invertebrates, and they have their own class. But what is special about an invertebrate that makes them different from a vertebrate? Absolutely, they do not have a backbone. No backbone. Have a quick look, remind yourself of all these classes. And if you forget, remember that you can go back in this video to find it, to remind yourself at any point. So, how are we going to draw our own classification key? Remember, the classification key is made up of questions which separate out groups of animals so that you can begin to classify exactly what animal you are looking at. 1. The first thing that we need to do is look at a group of animals that are in front of us. I've started with our first animals that we had on our odd one out at the beginning of this session. Look carefully at each of the animals and record their key characteristics. We can talk about the fact that some of them are mammals, some are birds, some are invertebrates. You can record the fact there's scales or hair, their colour. You are going on to that biologist, that's that scientist that studies the world, that biologist observational skill. Once you have looked carefully at the animals, you then need to start to think about some questions that separate them out. The first question that came to my mind was, does it have a backbone? Because 3 of the animals on the screen have got backbones, the snake, the bird, and the mammal. But the black tarantula is an invertebrate, so that would separate that out from the other 3 animals. So then I would be left with 3 animals, and I need to think about what separates, what's different, what makes them special. So does it fly? Well, the only animal there that flies is the toucan. Does it have legs? Well, the snake has no legs. Does it have spots? 2 animals there have spots, but 2 do not. Has it got 8 legs? That would help you find your spider. So once I've compared my animals and I've thought about some key questions, remembering that my answers to these questions must be yes or no, I then can start constructing my classification key. Now, if you would like to, you could do this alongside me, so you've worked these steps. So the first question that I came up with was, does it have a backbone? So at the top of your page, you could write the question, does it have a backbone? Just like this. I'm going to hold it up to the screen. Need a question mark at the end because it is a question. Does it have a backbone? Now that's back to front of you, which is why you put it on the screen. Once I've got that, I can then get my ruler and I can draw a line underneath. And I can have my no length and my yes length, just like this on the screen. nice and neat. Now, if I'm thinking about a spider, I might say, oh, no. So I can put my black tarantula at the end of my no line. Halfway through my black tarantula. I need to think about the fact that I couldn't write all 3 animals on this next one, so I need to choose another question that's going to separate these animals out. So the next question I thought I'd use was, does it have feathers? Now I'm separating my toucan, which has feathers, and my jaguar and my anaconda out. So again, I have my no and yes lines. And then my yes, because that toucan does have feathers, shows me this. Now I need to separate my jaguar and my anaconda. Does it have 4 legs? Now the anaconda has no legs and the jaguar has 4. So my yes line would be the jaguar and my no would be the green anaconda. Now it might be that that's gone a little bit too quick, so you can rewind this bit of the video and you can rewatch it, or you can use this and pause it to draw your own version of this in your book as a practice, because your task is going to be to draw your own classification key. I have found 5 animals that come from the rainforest. There is the sloth, the orangutan, the blue morpho butterfly, piranha, and the caiman. They have all got one thing in common, and that is they all live in the ecosystem of the rainforest. The ecosystem is a community of plants, animals, habitats, and microorganisms. So they all live in the rainforest. You are going to draw a classification key to separate out these animals according to their classifications. So we're going to work through these together. First, I suggest you pause it and just have a good look at these animals. Now, in your book, can you please write down your observations? So I would write the name sloth, and then next to it, what you can see for that sloth. Now we did the sloth at the end of one of the last sessions, so we have some ideas about the sloth. You could talk about its hair, you could talk about its habitat, you could talk about its class, whether it's a mammal, a bird, a reptile. You could talk about the fact it's got its young hanging on him. What kind of animal would that idea would it give you? You could talk about colour, how long its nose is, how many legs it's got. All these things you are going to note next to the name sloth in your notebook. Then you'll follow on with the next animal. So you will in a moment be pressing pause and writing about all 5 animals in your book or on your piece of paper. Press pause now. Now that you've written all of your observations, I'd like you to now read them over carefully. Think about what you've noticed about these 5 animals that all live in our rainforest ecosystem. And now you need to start to compare them. But first, here are my observations about these animals. The orangutan was a vertebrate. It's a mammal. It has long arms and long orange hair. It's got 2 legs, 2 arms. It's an omnivore, and its habitat is trees. The blue morpho butterfly is an invertebrate. It has 2 wings, it flies, it's a herbivore, and it is bright blue. It's a beautiful, vibrant blue. The sloth is a vertebrate. It's a mammal. It's a herbivore. I know that because I've looked it up. It's got long hair, 4 legs, and it lives in trees. So there's a similarity there with the orangutan, but it is different because of its 4 legs and its colour of hair. So I could remember that when I'm thinking of my questions later. The piranha is a vertebrate, but it's a fish, so its habitat is water, and it is a carnivore. It is a carnivore just like the caiman is. So we've got a vertebrate, it's a reptile. It's a carnivore, it has 4 legs and it has a tail, and its habitat is a riverbank. So now I've got those observations, I can start to compare them and think of some yes/no questions. So I would like you now to, in a moment, to press pause and look at your animals and your observations and come up with 4 or 5, maybe 6 questions that the answer is yes or no, that link to those organisms, those living things that live in our rainforest ecosystem. Press pause. Have you got all of your questions? Check that when you answer them, that they say yes or no, because sometimes it's easy to ask a question that's more open-ended. We just want a closed yes or no answer. Have you checked? Brilliant. Okay, let's move on. So, next to my notes, I wrote some questions. Again, I like the does it have a backbone because it helps me to separate quickly any insects, any arachnids from any of my other types of animals. Does it fly? Does it only eat plants? Does it live in the water? Does it have gills? Does it have hair? Is it a carnivore? Now, I might not use all these questions, but they're there to kind of help me with a starting point and start to separate out, and I'll see as I go along where I go. Now, you need to start to plan out your classification key. I suggest that you have your page landscape, so not portrait, landscape, and you start with your key question at the top so that you can see clearly and then work down. It might be that you have to go over onto another page, but if you keep your words nice and neat, they should all fit in. Ruler for all those lines. So, using your notes, have it in front of you, and then use your ruler to draw out question by question. Start with your first question and go for yes and no. What animals go off the no? What animals go off the yes? Do you need another question to separate those animals out? You will need to press pause now so that you can get on with your key. Check through that you've got all of your key. Have you got all animals that you are meant to be finding? All 5 animals? Have you got to the end on your classification key? Check through. Excellent. So, whilst you were all doing your classification key, I also made a key on here. Let's see, it will look different to yours, so it will not be exactly the same. My questions will not be questions that you have thought of, but it will hopefully help you to check to see whether you went in the right direction. So, here are our 5 animals, and they're all very different, but the one thing that they have in common is that they all live in the rainforest ecosystem, absolutely. So the first question I asked was, is it a mammal? Because I could see that some of these animals were mammals and some of these animals were not. So this separated out my animals. These 2, the sloth and the orangutan, are both mammals. So what separates those 2 mammals from each other? They both have long hair, they both have the same types of arms, they both live in trees. The thing that was different was the colour of their hair. So I asked, does it have long orange hair? And then we got to the yes, it is an orangutan, and no, it's a sloth. So I have done these 2 animals. Now I can start to look at separating out these 3, the butterfly, the fish, and the caiman. Does it fly? Well, if it does fly, then it must be the blue morpho butterfly. No, well, I've still got 2 animals left, so I have to separate them out. Does it have gills? Only fish have gills. So if it does have gills, it must be the piranha, and if it doesn't, it's the caiman. Have a look now at yours. Can you follow through, and have you found all of the animals? Well done, an excellent job. Takes a little bit of time to work through methodically, but a very good scientific skill to use. Excellent. So, we know now how to classify and group animals in lots of different ways, according to habitat, according to diet, according to their physical features, and if they're a vertebrate or an invertebrate. We know how to compare them and to use those observations to separate species out, like the sloth and the orangutan. We have used and created our own key to do that. And our observation skills are definitely improving. In our next lesson, we are going to start to look a little bit more closely at how the plants and animals interact in our rainforest ecosystem. Because if every ecosystem is a community of plants and animals and habitats and microorganisms, we need to start to look more about how they interact with each other. Looking forward to seeing you then and to learning a little bit more science with you. See you soon. Bye.